Hello everybody. Today this is Act 3, but however, the video had to come out late because I accidentally deleted the original video, so I had to now re-record the audio for Act 3. So this is fun. Anyways, this is Act 3 of Hell Has a Prison. Yay! My mind was brought back to consciousness the day the shadows stopped striking. It was growing close to another reset. I was sitting limply in my realm of torment, constantly under the onslaught of what shadow creatures resided here. They clawed and stabbed at me, but my body had grown used to the scratches they made. They healed over more quickly, meaning that resets had become more common than before. But it stopped. At first they were just slowing down, but soon, one by one, each of the shadows came to a standstill. I could still feel their presence, like breath on the back of my neck, sending shivers down my spine and goosebumps across what skin I had left. Then they took off, either sprinting away and leaving a small gust of wind in their place, or fading back into the floor of my chamber. This was not normal. Typically, they'd beat me down until my body was wet with blood, but they'd only left a few marks. The room had stopped shifting as well. I swallowed and pointlessly looked around in the darkness, trying to see what had made them leave. As I sat there, I could hear something. A whisper, the language of the angels, the rapid shifting of tongues slipping through multiple dialects in milliseconds. But something about this voice was off. It was distorted at some point, frighteningly deep and gravelly, before shifting to a tone more befitting of the language spoken in the moment. The voice grew louder and louder, and I spun around on the spot, trying to figure out where it was coming from. I soon discerned its origin from within my own head. My heart was pounding hard within my chest, beating violently against the ribcage. "Be not afraid, child. I have chased the shadows away." The millions of voices had stopped abruptly, leading to this voice of a young man, professional and kind with a hint of malice. It seemed to be trying to cover up an echo of madness that followed every word it spoke. I looked upwards, expecting to see a fallen one hovering above me, but there was only pitch black. Hello? I whispered to the dark. "Yes, hello, child." "Who's there? Who are you? Show yourself." "Hush now. That's no way to treat your savior. Now please settle down. There is much to speak of, much for you to learn of, and I have little patience for meaningless quarrel." The room felt colder. I slowly huddled down, keeping my eyes up on alert, watching for anything at all that might appear. What is it? I need to know. "You will be my champion, Hella." Hearing someone speak my name for the first time in ages brought a tear to my eye. I could feel my heart relax slightly, taking some comfort in the stranger's words. I even laughed a bit, though this was more at the insanity of the proposition. "You're champion, eh? And what do you expect me to do exactly? And how do you know my name?" "I know many things, Helena. Many things." "Then tell me what was happened to me, what this place is, if you're so all-knowing." I continued to whisper for all I knew. I was only going mad. I didn't need the guards to suddenly hear me and give me an extra reset. "Oh, you humans. If I can even call you that anymore. If I do, you will be my champion. Do we have a deal?" I bit my lip, then nodded to myself. Anything was better than being alone and suffering again, even being this thing's champion. "Oh, okay." "Contract established. It's been a pleasure." The voice groaned as though we were settling into a chair to tell me a bedtime story. "Now then, what do you know of Cambions?" One of the angels here, fallen angels, called me that." "As he should have. Good, Raquel. Making your curiosity blossom. Now, when you came to this realm, you saw my minions manifest from your fellow Sidians to drag them away. Did you notice, Hela, that no guardian angels spawn from the backs of other sinners? Do you know why that is? I shook my head by instinct, but somehow the voice noticed this. You see, child, your God. They paused for a moment here, sounding particularly agitated. Your God crafted humanity in his own image. He could not have his own creation grow to overthrow him. Having been born of God and angel, you would be immensely powerful. So a portion of your soul was stripped from you, a hole in your very being. When I tempted the first ones with the fruit of knowledge, they became aware. Their blissful ignorance towards their incomplete nature was shattered, and thus they began to pursue other methods of filling the void. Humanity today is no different. Booze, drugs, sex, wealth, all of these different powers, you abuse them to fix the void that he left in you. And it's always wanting more. More money, more sex, more food. It seeks to be whole, child. But as long as you follow his word, his Bible, you resist that urge and stay weaker than him. Wait a minute, I spoke out. The voice wasn't quite the same, but I thought I knew who I was speaking to. And my throat grew tighter. The memories of my resets flooded my brain, and the face of the warden was burned into my consciousness. You're the jailer? It laughed at me again. Oh, come on now. You truly thought that was that miserable blasphemer? Mephistopheles? Ha! Perhaps you're too foolish to be my champion. No, wait, please. I got on my knees and clasped my hands together, begging to the ceiling for the devil not to go. I'm sorry. Please don't go. It's so lonely here. Very well, I forgive you, child, but never confuse me for his kind again. I fell from the heavens above, and he was spawned in this abyss, understand? I nodded quickly, keeping silent. I did not want to anger the only company I would ever have in here, even if it meant it was the Prince of Evil. And one last note. I prefer Lucifer. It sounds much more majestic than Satan or Hellel and all those other nonsense nicknames you people have for me. Now then, where was I? Oh, yes, the revolt. I did not agree with this, such a large race of creatures being denied their true potential just so he could play with them as he pleased. So after shattering the illusion that blinded Adam and Eve, I called upon my brethren, and we tried to take control of the throne. We marched into God's temple, fighting against the foolish angelic collective, stripping away our masks to show our true unique selves. Unfortunately, we... Lucifer coughed at this point, and with a disgruntled mumble he continued. It sounded as though it pained him to admit defeat. We were unable to succeed, and for that, a third of his angels were tossed into the depths. I was thrown especially hard and deep, down here to the darkest, coldest layer of hell. An image flashed in my mind. It was a cold blue cavern with a floor of ice and bodies stuck within. At the center was a massive figure, as tall as a skyscraper, and as wide as one too. Its wings were clipped as well, like the other angels, but they were frozen over, unable to grow any feathers. Chains hung from the stony ceiling and wrapped around every part of the creature's body. Upon its face, a metal mask, gray and scratched, with the same wispy smoke spiraling out from the burnt-out eye holes and mouth, blackened and rough around the edges, and surrounding the base of the being were multiple fallen angels, bowing in worship or standing and whispering that nauseating beratement of words. When the vision ended, I found myself gasping for air, coughing and choking to breathe. But he spoke on. Though I was without much of my power, from the second I landed, I was planning my return to the divine realm. With time and malice, I turned the first sinful ones sent here into monsters, the first demons, given some degree of power by myself. There would be my army. Once I broke free of this icy prison and fight on the front lines of my revolution. Until then, they would travel to Earth in an ethereal form, lingering over their former kind to drag them more of them into the underworld. Now every person on Earth has a demon on their shoulder from birth to death. This role was risky, however. The hole in human souls, should it become strong enough, can pull in the very demon that is clinging on and whispering temptations into their ears. Hence why you never see one of his angels coming out of their bodies. He does not want to risk one of his precious warriors being swallowed up in your void. So they stay up in heaven. Needless to say, when this does happen with a demon, it results in your current disposition, child. The birth of a Cambion, the forbidden fusion of demon and man. There are two ways this can happen. The first is when a demon convinces a person into a form of sin so often that the human incorporates that very sin into their daily life, until committing it becomes no hassle. I looked down in the dark towards my shaking hands. I could not see them, but I knew what was there anyways. My palm was of pale skin, and the other side of sickly magenta scales, stained in spots of brown. I wasn't human anymore, only a Cambion, only a monster. It's a part of them, and so the void is filled as the demon and the man become one, and a fuser like yourself is created, or so the demons have taken to calling you. Knowing what I had become chilled me to the core, as though I could feel the space he spoke of pulsating from within. The hole in my very being now being filled by demonic concrete, I covered my ears tightly. I was done listening. I'd heard enough. These were lies. They had to be. I'm not a monster, I whispered to myself over and over again, but no amount of repetition or blocking could shut out the devil's voice. The other is something far more interesting, and much more terrifying to Mephisto's kind. Sometimes a human is born with an innate malice, a cruelty towards their god, their own species, and even themselves, a desire to sin. Perhaps it comes from a void that can never be filled, but who's to say? Those who sin for the sole purpose of acting out against God spiritually consume the demon, a morbid end for any hellspawn unlucky enough to be assigned to such a human. These are the Devourers, and when they arrive, well, let's just say they're not nearly as easily contained as you are. The king of the fallen angels laughed again. This time it's imitating the growl I had heard echoing throughout the prison before, the sound of the Devourers. My skin crawled trying to imagine the form of a person would have to undergo to make a sound like that. Now then, if we're done talking about your needs, it's time that mine were met. Still struggling to fully come to terms with what was happening, I choked out a reply. What do you mean? You know what I mean. Becoming my champion. You really are this dim-witted. In which case, I'll have to find... What do I have to do? I exclaimed, my voice echoing throughout the void. Sweat dripped down my face. I almost lost him. Even if I didn't like what was being said, it was still better than before. Good. Some time ago, Mephisto started to ignore my command. He claimed control over my realm, and being imprisoned here, there was nothing that I could do. Ordering my brothers to slaughter the army I had spent so long building up was out of the question, and he took advantage of this. The demons now obey his orders, but in truth, those fallen angels you sin are still loyal to the true lord of this place. There is a structure that your people have been building for years now, one that truly scrapes the sky. Do you know of what I speak? It had been there for so long. I'd come there. It took a moment to recall. I had only heard some mentions of the elevator here and there, a large transportation tunnel that connected to a space platform where humanity would begin the first attempts at frequent space travel. The last I'd heard was in that bar that night my demon began to merge with me, or so Lucifer claimed. There was a reason your god knocked down the Tower of Babel, a different reason from the claims of hubris he protested. The only way for a creature of hell to reach heaven is by a physical ladder. A structure of any kind will do, but so long as it goes high enough, we can erupt from the earth and rise to paradise. So as you can see, it was not by a punishment for excessive pride, but rather it was out of self-preservation. Mephisto believes he will invade heaven with my army. When that structure is completed within the coming days, he is gravely mistaken. You will escape this prison, within the prison, and fly off to Earth. There you will cling to any man of your choosing, and bring that tower crashing down. Do this, and I will give you a place in my army. I swallowed as the devils cackled inside my head. My heart yet sank again. You want me to kill innocent people? To stop an invasion of heaven? That is correct. Why? Isn't that what you want? Fool! Mephisto cares not for your kind, and should he take that throne, he will lay waste to your world. Hell on earth, as you would say, and that is putting it delicately. I merely wish to change the cruel laws that restrain your people. The word of God is out of date, in need of renewal. I seek that future, one ruled by a truly fair God. He wanted me to knock down a tower and kill thousands of innocent people. Take your own predicament, for example. You didn't lust for your own sake to start. You wish to help your friend. But lust is lust, and rules are rules to him. A sin is a sin, and you are doomed to come here regardless of intent. Do you see? I understand, child. I see for who you are. I couldn't respond, not right away. Even after being a prisoner of Apollyon for so long, these revelations made me dizzy. Spinning round and round, my brain trying to continue this juggling act between the morally righteous and my own desires. I would be the murdering perfectly good people who have lives to live, but it would mean my own freedom from this prison. Hela, you would be sacrificing a mere few thousands to protect literal billions, whereas Mephisto would see every last one of them burn. You sold your body to heal your friend once before, but now when you are called upon to save humanity itself, you turn your back? I had no response. No direction seemed correct, so I'd stayed silent at the crossroads, refusing to choose. Why me? I whispered to myself. Perhaps because your name reminds me of myself. Some of your people would call me something similar. Lucifer chuckled once again. Call it my Achilles heel. A gurgling in my gut began to spring up. My other half reared its ugly head, lured out by the promise of self-preservation, and aiming to smooth out my sense of morality. I could be free. I could escape this hellhole, just knock down the tower, and that's it. Besides, I had no idea how many people it would actually kill. I was just guessing. I couldn't humanely know how many people I'd hurt. Maybe no one would get hurt. Probably only a few people. Then humanity would be safe from Mephistopheles, and I'd be free. And it wasn't like I was walking up to people and stabbing people in the gut with a knife or chopping their heads off. They'd die by coincidence. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then I'd be free. I'd only be killing demons and angels when I was giving a rank in this army. Not in the prison. Free. How do I get out of here? The laugh that followed was the cruelest of them all, riddled with victorious overtone. Cracks of light pierced the room, and the devil left with his 1,000 voices as the door of my cell creaked open. I recognized the looming figure of a fallen angel hovering in the doorframe, and slowly crept over, humbled and meek as I had been conditioned to behave when the doors opened. However, I was not throttled by the neck and dragged out of the cell. Instead, the angel simply waited, perhaps scoffing and gesturing for me to hurry up. My eyes reacted to the firelight by shutting immediately, but the many building sounds forced them back open out of curiosity. All of the doors in the cell block were open. Slowly, horrific abominations of my kin crawled out. The cell across from me had a sickeningly green man, scrawny and literally gutless, stumble out while cracking and popping one of his many arms back into place. He carried several more, and gave me a beastly stare as though I would steal his limbs. To my left, another creature came, but this person was the opposite. Their gut was almost all I could see, with a monstrous scar of a jack-o'-lantern teeth across its width, with orange skin to match. I stumbled back slightly when the stomach lipped its lips. On my other side, a tall, muscular, yet nude man was observing the Halloween flock. He appeared human for the most part, but when our eyes met, the cold of a long winter shocked my system. Snorting, he walked past, not paying me any mind as his scales lengthened out into coattails and a top hat, motioning for the other Cambions to follow him. It was just an illusion of leadership, however. Once the more primal prisoners stopped trying to kill one another, all of the inmates were rushing down the corridor regardless, on foot, wing, or along the walls. I was stuck towards the back of the horde, with the fallen angel following by my side. A prickling sensation touched my neck, and I looked at the angel, whose smoky face was mere inches from my own. Once the thousand voices settled, it spoke clear English in a raspy tone. I am Thamel. Our highest brother wished to inform you that this exercise should remove the fear of your task. His strength is reborn at long last. Do not let this all be for naught, Cambion. Swallowing, I nodded, then turned my head away and kept running from the group. I didn't bother asking anything else. This was my shot at freedom, and wasting time with questions would probably make Lucifer shift his favor elsewhere. For all I knew, this could be a competition between us all to see who his champion would be. As I rounded the corner, I could hear the grumbling and howling of fellow Cambions. The spikes on the walls had extended out, creating a fence of rust and stone between us and one of the stairwells. A few Cambions had been pierced while crossing, growling in agony and yelling at others to get them down. Not many helped, as a new sound caught everyone's attention, the clambering of claws and feet. We turned to witness an ensemble of guards come up from behind us. The more ravenous Cambions rushed to the front lines and collided with the demons, while us timid few stayed back looking at each other. I can't do this, one goat cried, huddling on the floor and holding her head. I thought we were just going to be free. Enough of this. We need to do something. The many-armed green man from the forest stepped forward. You! Come help me! 3 of his hands pointed at me. Huh? Before I could fully respond, he grabbed my arm. You're going to help me. He wasn't afraid. Rather, he seemed quite angry and just happened to have a stutter. Okay. I scrambled across the fire to look for an easy target. I pointed out one of the smaller guards. What if you distract that guy with your arms or something and I... No! He shouted, drawing my target's attention. I want the kill. Okay, fine. I looked to the guard, now rushing at me. Biting my lip, my mind raced through ways of slowing him down. Looking down my figure, I realized the answer. Taking a deep breath, I stared down the guard and reached back, throwing my hands through my hair. Slowly, the tension in my stomach disappeared, as that old confidence poured through my veins once more. I stretched my arms upwards, making sure to keep eye contact with the guard. He was still running at me. I wasn't influencing him. The energy began to wobble and fade, so I tried a last-ditch effort. One hand to the groin, another over my breast. I was far too afraid of what the guard would do if he reached me to become flustered, but my line of sight stayed focused on his. And with a quiet wish for his lust to come out, I released my breath and watched. The eyebrow twitch was the first to come, then the stopping of his feet, and the slow approach as the guard reached out to caress my cheek. I forced a fake smile to lure him just a bit closer, but I couldn't hide my shock as his head was twisted around by a fleet of hands. The dark blood splattered across my body, and as I tried to wipe the sludge off, I watched the green man pry open the guard's back. Each hand rushed inside, gripping organs and muscles alike, then plastered them on the man's body. The green skin began to spread over the bloody body parts, and the man gasped and choked a few times as they were added to his form. Bones cracked as he snapped off one of the demon's arms, then reached behind him and shoved it into his spine with a grisly snap. Its red skin slowly joined the same shade as his other appendages. Before he gave me a look. What? What do you want? You did fine. It wasn't the green man's actions that terrified me. It was the scream still coming from the guard's mouth as he thrashed his head about endlessly, snapping his teeth at the man. Nodding shakingly, I returned my gaze to the fight. Rolling the fingers on each hand, I approached the bloodbath as another guttural scream echoed through the prison. As a mass of bone and hunger, we pushed our way through Apollyon's halls. I would go to the side and seduce a few guards, inebriating them long enough to be devoured by the stomach monsters, or have their bodies torn to pieces by rugged, thorny beasts. They frightened me the most. The idea that they were once human was unfathomable. On the off chance there was no one there to help, it was up to me to eliminate the demon I'd enchanted. The first time my throat was so tight that I couldn't breathe in the heated air. I waited and waited, hoping someone would come to my rescue. But it was not to be. His hands slid their way down my arm and around my hip as he mumbled some foul language with equally foul breath. Then he ran his claws against my neck. The car, the darkness, Paul, the mud, the water, cold like ice, sinking into the depths. My hand had already pierced his neck before I snapped out of the recollection. Black demon blood trickled down my arm as he grabbed it, breaking free of my spell. Now both of us were aware of the situation, and the first to act would win. I made sure that he wouldn't be able to follow up anytime soon. Clawing out his eyes with my other hand was easy enough. The miserable bastard just lies there, as he continued to bleed and grovel on the floor. Slowly, we descended the floors until we were in the main lobby. The residual pain of having charred skin peeled from my body returned, but it didn't last long. Shaking a bit of blood off of my claws, I took notice of the many cambions tried to break through the main doors and walls. Alas, no matter how many struck against it, or how strong they swung, nothing budged. Many of the more wrathful cambions ignored the spines being driven through their limbs as they bashed their bodies against the walls. A familiar cheer of an angel rushed through my body, and I turned to see the cambions making way for Famuel to approach the door. He brandished a large chain, clanking as he dragged it across the floor. When he reached the blocked exit with a lightning-fast hand, he whipped the chain against the door. Cracks of light spread over its surface. The door was about to break. Then they resided. Slowly, the thin lines faded away, and the door was fine once more. I could hear the 1,000 voices growing louder, more agitated than before. He whipped the door again to the same effect. An ear-piercing screech erupted from the angel, a pitch so high it made every hybrid in the room flinch. "Marquis Samuel!" Famuel turned to the back of the crowd. "The false one is blocking our way." 2 more waves of icy goosebumps rippled through my form, and from the corner of my eye I saw them. 2 more fallen ones glided across the room, one with a pitcher in hand, and the other with many steel bands around the arm. "Brother Samuel, you have my wine," one of the angels whispered in a lighter voice than the others I'd heard of a female. "Thank you, Zariel. And of you, Marquis?" Samuel gestured to the last angel as he took his chain and straightened it out. "Let us be done with this lock already." The third answered, lifting his right forearm to show the bands, now turning and shifting. If one could describe a voice as infernal, this was a prime example. He snorted and huffed with a voice that barely passed grumbling. Samuel nodded, then looked to Zariel. She pressed her smoky face to the pitcher and whispered rapidly, then poured what looked like the blood of demons over the chain. Marquis straightened his arm towards the door, and the bands began to spin faster, rotating in one direction before stopping on a dime and turning the other way. My spine turned to ice a third time, stronger than the others, but it was the breath of my neck that made me turn to see them. Many more had come, all standing solemnly and still. The collective voices drilled into my mind, and I couldn't help grabbing my head, falling to my knees. I saw the rest of the cambions collapse as well, even the coat-tailed ones. One standing tall and proud bowed their hands to the fallen angels. I tried to stand up as hard as I could, but some force kept me from doing so. Despite staying still, I grew dizzy by the multitude of 1,000 voices. And so, my eyes shifted their gaze to the door. The tip of the solid chain that Samuel wielded was pushed into the door, and the bands had expanded on Marquis's arm, with pieces flying off and orbiting around with the circles. And then there were the ghosts. Endlessly, the apparitions of the other angels rushed to the door, with fading echoes of their positions following behind. The form slammed against the large demonic block, and with time the cracks began to return. Their hue had changed from white to red, and splintered through the surface of the door much more quickly. My consciousness started to flicker with the air being overwhelmed in heat and power. And just before I collapsed for good, crack! The door shattered, just like the cell doors had. Pieces of steel broken like glass rained down, and the aura subsided. Slowly we stood again, shaking our heads and rising to our feet, gazing in horror at the angels that were stepping through the wall. That limited demonstration spoke gravities. Do not fuck with the devil's brothers. But even they had to pause when the growling came. It started low, yet louder than usual, reverberating against the rough interior of Apollyon. Then the sound of crumbling stone followed. The prison wall to the left of the doorway began to lift, just a bit at first, before exploding violently, sending pieces of rock everywhere. One scratched my arm, but other cambions took full chunks to the head or body. Even the angels backed their way into the entrance hole, and once the dust settled, I could see why. The thing stood like a gorilla, about half as tall as the prison itself. Massive veins pumped glowing crimson liquids down its grotesquely muscular appendages. Dark as night in color, the outer layer of its limbs shifted randomly between scales and flesh, like the flickering of flame. Claws and sharp bones were heavily exposed, with blood pouring down its frame. Like evil waterfalls from where they pierced its flesh, the crusted shackles around its limbs were shattered and loose. And whipping around with the beast's movement, the insidious roar I'd come to know sounded as the devourer opened its greatly fanged mouth, and I felt a rush of both fear and vigor watching it charge across the large open field that led to our way out. The cambions growled in unison and followed the monster, as the front wall of Apollyon collapsed around us. For the first time in possibly decades, I set foot on the dusty ground outside of the prison, and I felt the increased temperature of fire and lava alike, and heard the thunder crackling above, and blocking the final gateway out. A small hole in the towering wall of metal were the remnants of prison guards, various other demons, and Mephistopheles himself. Mephisto did not focus on us smaller creatures. Instead, he huddled his body nearly into a sphere, calling on some form of power. Streams of energy flowed through the cracks in the ground towards him, and he began to grow. His deep red complexion grew darker still, until his body matched the hue of a starless night sky, and was the same size as the monstrous devourer that was rushing for him. He grabbed the behemoth by its horns and began throttling around with it. I ran through the ashes and blood with Marcius and some other inmates. Demons would rush us every few moments. I would lull as many as I could into blissful ignorance, while one coattail would humble the rest, exerting an aura of dominance I'd never seen before. I even saw him manage to turn one demon against his own kind a few times. The rest would carve up our foes and toss them to the stomach mouths, who happily chomped down to the hellspoons, turning them into a slurpy mess of gore and broken bones. Marcius put his bands to good use, smashing in the face of the guards with rusted knuckles. He'd scrape the metal back and forth sometimes, grinding down the bridge of the nose so it would tear the eyeballs to pieces. And as for myself, I began to rely less on the others. I wasn't their problem, so why should I expect them to protect me? My claws were the easiest to use, but I tried ripping out throats with the spikes of my scaly forearms, the constantly screaming due to the residual consciousness inside the bodies we broke eventually went from gruesome to annoying, and even I went after the vocal cords on a couple to specifically shut them up. Just before reaching the gate, one large demon broke free of my charm. With a single backhand, I was sent sprawling back, the air knocked out of my lungs. Just as I'd come to figure out, the others did not bother with me. Not even Marcius cared enough to help, or Samuel. I was easily replaceable in Lucifer's eyes. A heaviness landed on my heart, and I looked up to see the demon that hit me, grinning wide and lifting its mace above its head. "Come here, darling." A tender voice gazed my ear, and the demon immediately turned away from me to stumble towards the source of the voice. I got up and looked as well. It was another Cambion like me, but like the massive devourer, she was much darker in tone. Her scales shimmered against the fire, and she mowed deeply as the hellspawn approached. What a big boy you are! Her slender arms wrapped around him, and he embraced her equally. I could see his head turn to kiss her neck, and as she lifted her head to do the same, I finally saw the difference between us. The wells of midnight malice that stirred back at me as she sank her fangs into the demon's shoulder. What was more terrifying was his reaction, or lack thereof. She scratched the flesh away from his sides and dug into his stomach, while dusty streams of light poured away from his body and up her arms into her own. She knocked him down and reached inside, yanking and pulling until she managed to crack the rib cage open, feasting on his innards while the demon's soul was absorbed, all the while with the grandest smile on that hellspawn's face. The smile of that black-stained teeth and abyssal eyes torched their way into my memories, and I found my way to my feet, leaving the devourer to her meal. I hastened to catch up to the rest of the Cambions, but deep down the furnace had been fueled. They had abandoned me. They left me behind to put back into the rotting shithole. Any one of them could have easily taken care of that guy, but no. They only cared about themselves. So if they laid the groundwork, they'd better be not hypocrites. 2 guards tried to stop me from slipping past the door, but they couldn't do anything once they couldn't see me. I shook my hands, flicking the gooey spheres off of their claws, then sprinting for the boat, avoiding all of the suffering demons along the way. Marcius and Sariel were there, and the other Cambions had begun to close the gate. I pushed my muscles as hard as I could, and managed to leap into a group of Cambions just as the gates were closed. The ones I flattered began to call and yas at me, if they could still remember a human language. But a flick of the blood-drenched claw and an equally angry look back would halt and diffuse those reactions. The boat slowly began to float away. Most people watched the ongoing battle, the rampaging war between Mephisto and the Great Devourer, Cambions and demons alike falling from the edges of the isle. Lightning continued to boom across the sky. It hadn't changed since the first day I arrived. The same swirling clouds all focused around the point somewhere in the main cylinder land of hell. Cold struck me, and I turned to face Samuel. I wasn't afraid, not fully. I'd gotten used to the chill. Once off the boat, you're about to go where the clouds convene, he ordered. That is where you find your way to the surface. Before I could respond or nod, he turned away and hovered back over the front of the ship by the gate we'd be exiting on with Zariel and Samuel. The boat rocked hard as it landed on the main island, making the inch-deep puddle of sludge at our feet ripple and lap against our ankles. The 2 demons on the shore see us rushing off the boat, but no one expected the metal blades that were forced through their chest. Dangling about, I watched as a familiar angel tossed the 2 monsters off of his blades, Rakiel and his bladed gauntlets. The gate opened. Cambions flooded the mainland, all running off in different directions. I gave Rakiel a look as I passed. He only seemed to stare back quietly. Even his rapid tongue was silent, like the flapping wings of a hummingbird. Many of the Cambions went back to where we had first fallen into hell. Others began terrorizing humans and demons alike. I took the ensuing chaos as an opportunity to avoid as many fights as possible. With my eyes to the sky, I crept my way across the barren, touched world, trying to navigate around craters and crevices alike, hiding behind pillars of darkened stone and cauldrons of flame. On occasion, I'd be noticed. Seduction now only reminded me of those bottomless eyes and bloody smile of the devourer I'd witnessed. One demon got lucky after breaking free from my spell. My resets as Apollyon usually avoided the eyes directly. This one got his claws stuck in mine, so I returned the favor whilst howling in pain. Though my hand grew wet with our blood, and my eye was ruined, that was not what pushed my heart deeper into despair. The bloodstains were black, and I could not tell whose was whose. I couldn't tell you if they were tears, mixed the sanguine stream from the empty socket, but there were certainly some spilled from the other eye. Clutching my eye hole, I stumbled over the jagged stones of the umbral plains, trying to work my way to where the clouds converged. With time, I found myself underneath the eye of the spiral. The center of the sky snaked upwards like a red tunnel, and directly below it was a large set of circular steps to a platform. Demons were lined up and slowly ascending the steps, approaching an altar at the top. A large devil skull was carved into the cliff that loomed over the zone. Staying behind one of the many stones fencing this strange area, I watched one demon turn and gesture to the others before stepping onto the final layer. Yet another fallen angel guarded the altar and held in his hand a large staff. Thorns trickled down its length, sourced from the bronze disc that adorned the top. The two talked for a moment. The staff was raised, and a sudden wind began to blow all around me. It felt like a vacuum trying to suck me in towards the angel and the demon, and with my one good eye, I could see the hellspawn being carried off by the gale, flailing wildly around as it entered the tunnel in the sky and disappeared from sight. I knelt back down, deciding to just wait it out until the demons lessened in numbers. If not gone altogether to get onto the altar, that's when they come yet again. Fading in like faulty television screens, I witnessed each demon in that line meet their end by the hand of one angel each, a blade through the torso, blunt force to the head, and other gruesome fates were delivered in that moment. When the body fell into the ashes, the fallen began to spread out, forming a perimeter between the fence of rocks. The gatekeeper kept to their post, and one other angel approached me. The blades retracted back to its gauntlets, gave away the angel's identity. Raquel. He caught my arm as I stumbled out from behind one of the spears, hurrying me along to the altar. We have claimed the path for you to leave this place. The rest is in your hands. It was the only sentence he ever spoke to me, and it was probably for the best. Where Marcius may have been grueling and devilish, I'd forgotten the coldness of Raquel, and the only other word he'd spoken. If I hadn't been so occupied or in so much pain, I would have taken the time to think about the effects these angels' voices had on other beings, myself included. I carefully ascended the layers of the altar and arrived before the gatekeeper. She looked upon me from every direction, clearly not being used to seeing a Cambion. Champion of our highest brother, she began. Today, you begin a path to bring more members of humanity under the canopy of his 6 wings. You should know well that though they will be the ones punished for these sins, you will be the root initiator. For our sins, they will suffer. Do you accept this fate? To make others sin? That's what I would be doing, making others sin to unknowingly save the whole. I looked up at the tall cloaked creature and nodded slightly, still holding my bleeding eye. Yes, I understand. The angel tilted her head, then pushed away my hand with her staff. The release of pressure brought on the return of pain, and I winced as she inspected it. She then gestured behind me. Before long, another familiar being stood by me. Sariel. Sister Sariel, please heal this one with your waters, the gatekeeper whispered. As you wish, Sister Laurentil. Sariel raised her pitcher to her face, and just as before, her 1,000 voices spoke at the speed of light. Its contents were spilling onto my face before I could even react, but by impulse I screamed when the burning began. A black crust formed over the left side of my face, and once the pain had subsided, I felt the gentle yet freezing fingers of Laurentil breaking the charcoal apart and clearing my face. It was very blurry, but I could see the shades of red and brown common to the realm, and the grey mass where the angel stood. Know this, Cambion, Laurentil continued, that should you ever be overwhelmed by guilt for your actions, you will be dragged back down here into the depths for failing to keep your resolve intact, and there shall be retribution to pay for doing so. Corrupt well and begone. Laurentil raised her staff, and a quiet breeze carrying out dust across hell turned into another maelstrom. I lost my footing and was swept up in an instant, unable to control my body orientation as I flew up into the storm clouds. It reminded me of the helpless unrest I experienced back in Apollyon within the shifting cell. I craned my neck and caught a glimpse of the ground below. Swarms of demons were rushing the altar, and the fallen angels were each watching over a separate direction. My gaze went in the other direction, to the dark hole. At the end of the spiraling tunnel, the rugged edges of stone began to give way to darkness. and though my eyes were wide open, there was nothing to see as I fell through the sky. Whoa, that was Hell as a Prison Act 3. Sorry I had to upload this late. I unfortunately lost the files during the upload, so I had to re-record everything. Woohoo, that's fun. Anyways, here's to part 5.